Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we are back with our monthly sponsored video from Plex. And this month I thought I would take a look at some of the players that I have in my possession to see how they do with higher end 4K media coming out of the Plex media server. Things are getting complicated out there because, of course, we've got HDR10, we've got Dolby Vision, we have all these different lossless audio formats, and I wanted to do an inventory of what some of these boxes are capable of and what they're not capable of, so you can pick the right device for your particular environment. And in this video, we're going to look at the Fire TV Cube 3rd generation that I just reviewed, the Apple TV 4K, the Nvidia Shield Pro, and an Xbox to see what each of these devices is capable of playing back. Now, things can change in the future because a lot of the shortfalls I might point out in a device might be fixable via software versus a new piece of hardware. So as things develop over time, of course, I will update this video. And I think it's going to be kind of a fun journey here to see what each of these can do. And you might find a device that does just what you need and you can save some money versus buying something more expensive. So we're going to get into this in just a second, but I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that this is a paid sponsorship from Plex, but they are not reviewing or approving what you're about to see before it is uploaded, and all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. So let's get into it now and see what these boxes can do when it comes to playing back higher-end 4K media. So we're going to start off here with the low-hanging fruit, which is the Nvidia Shield TV Pro. Not only can this play back Plex content, it can also double as your Plex server, and that is something we have covered in the past. It is a very Plex-friendly device, as you'll see here in a second. The current iteration looks like this. It's got a new remote, and the physical size is a little smaller. And what you'll find with the Nvidia Shield TV Pro is that it covers everything that I'm looking for in a player right now. So it will do Dolby Vision, that's embedded in your content. One caveat to that, though, is that you need to be using the 2019 Shield TV Pro or newer. So this older one here, which is a 2015 model, doesn't support Dolby Vision, but the newer ones do. However, all versions support HDR. All versions will automatically switch into 24p mode. They will support Dolby Atmos audio, both compressed and lossless. They also support Dolby True HD and DTS:X. So for the most part, everything will play back properly on the Shield TV. But there are some settings you need to enable to get the best performance out of it. So let's dive into that real quick. And I'm going to scroll down to what I currently have configured on mine, and you may have some suggestions of your own to add to the mix in the comment section. The first thing that I like to make sure is that my video quality settings are set as follows. The Adjust Automatically is off, and home streaming is set to maximum. These two should be the default on a TV player, but just double check because otherwise you might see some transcoding going on. If you don't have enough network bandwidth, you will certainly have interruptions in playback, but if you turn this on, you'll start seeing some transcoding. So you definitely want to have both of these settings as you see them here. One thing that I was playing with was doing the maximum setting for remote streaming, because I have a friend of mine in town who has the same fiber optic connection that I do, and we've been able to stream full bitrate movies to each other even though we're on the other side of town because we have so much bandwidth available. So you can actually have a remote experience as good as your home one, and I actually did a video on this in the playlist that you can see linked down below in the video description. I'm going to scroll down here to Advanced, and you want to make sure here that pass-through is set to HDMI. That is so that we get those audio tracks transferred over in the proper format. I have refresh rate switching set to on, and what this will do is that if you start watching a 24p movie, it will switch the television into the proper mode so you don't get frame jitters. And I'm a big proponent of 24p for 24p content, and so this is something that I always switch on immediately so I get my television matching the proper frame rate. And your television is going to do this a lot better than any onboard scaler might on your playback devices. Another thing that I often enable, and I don't have it enabled here, is resolution switching for a similar reason as to the 24p version. So for example, if I have a 1080p Blu-ray movie, what will happen is the Shield will switch down into 1080p for its output resolution, and then my LG OLED TV will use its internal scaler to bring it up to 4K. And I found, at least for my 45-year-old eyes, the scaler on my television works fine, and it adds or reduces some complexity in having onboard scaling going on. And again, I'm getting the exact copy of the movie delivered to my television set when this is enabled. Now, if you're having trouble with playback, take a look at your Shield's display settings. I've got mine up right here. This is off of the main menu, so we're looking at the configuration for the Shield hardware itself. And you can see for this particular capture device I'm plugged into, it has recognized a 4K 60 HDR10 display. Another thing that I like to go over to is advanced display settings. And I often like to make sure that the match content color space option is checked on. And that is another safeguard to make sure that things will get put into the proper mode or taken out of the wrong mode if you do have some varying types of dynamic range content in your library. Now, I would also suggest heading over to the advanced sound settings here to make sure that your Shield has detected all of your available audio formats. So if you go down here to available formats, I have mine set to auto because my luck has been pretty good with my Shield detecting things, but you can also set it to manual here and force different audio modes if you know that your receiver, for example, can support it. So the Shield TV Pro covers the gamut, and it can be your Plex server at the same time. There's another slightly less expensive Nvidia Shield that's shaped like a cylinder. That one should work fine on the playback side for all the different things that we just talked about, but it can't act as your server, and the apps on it I think are still limited to 32-bit only, which may limit you from doing game emulation and some of the other things that you might want to do on the Shield's very powerful processor. Let's move on now to the Apple TV 4K that I've magically hooked up here in a split second. And the Apple TV doesn't quite support everything the Shield does, although there are some encouraging components to it. The first is that I had good luck with Dolby Vision playing through Plex on it. It, of course, also supports HDR, and the videos are switching properly into 24p. In fact, the Apple TV does the best at 24p switching for apps other than Plex, like Netflix and Prime Video and Disney Plus. Everything seems to work properly for that 24p mode on the Apple TV, whereas on many other boxes it doesn't work as consistently. So that's one kind of plus in its favor. But the Apple TV does not support Dolby Atmos audio, compressed or uncompressed. It also doesn't work with lossless Dolby or DTS audio. So if you have a lot of movies encoded with lossless audio, the Apple TV, although it will play that audio back, it will likely adjust it or change it based on how it works. Now, on the settings screen here, you do have a few things to look at. The first, of course, is to make sure that your display has been recognized properly. My capture hardware here is showing up as 4K SDR, and that's what I'm shooting at, so that's why we don't have HDR enabled here. But you do want to make sure it has picked up everything properly here. The one setting that's important on the Apple TV for getting those HDR modes and the 24p mode to work is to go into this setting here called Match Content and making sure Match Dynamic Range is set to on and Match Frame Rate is set to on. These are both off by default, so turning these on will make sure that in Plex and other apps things will switch properly. And again, it does that very, very well. Now, as far as audio is concerned, if you go over to audio format, you'll see that I have change format set to off. When it's on, it will either go to stereo or to Dolby Digital 5.1. If you turn it off, as you'll see here on the screen, it converts it to multi-channel LPCM, which is a hit or miss kind of thing. It is not passing the audio back directly to the receiver like the Nvidia Shield does. So I think for a lot of you enthusiasts out there, this is not going to be something for those bigger Plex files, but it's probably going to be fine for a lot of the streaming services out there. Now, inside the Plex app on the Apple TV, there's a couple of settings to look at, but I think I have everything at the default right now. So if you look here at video quality, I have auto adjust quality set to off, and I have home streaming at maximum, just like we had on the Shield. If we go down to the advanced settings here, you can see I have allowed direct play on. This will ensure that we don't have any transcoding going on with the video, and it will try to pass through the video as best it can. I did turn off multi-channel audio boost to reduce the amount of audio processing, and then the display type I have set to auto here, so it will switch automatically. But as you can see, you don't have a lot of settings within the Plex app itself because the Apple TV OS kind of has an upper hand in how the device works. So let's move on now to the Fire TV Cube, 3rd generation. This is the one we reviewed the other day. They're actually making some improvements here on the Amazon side. So it did support Dolby Vision. It supported HDR. It was doing the 24p switchover properly. And I was excited initially because one of my Atmos movies worked, but that one had compressed Atmos audio and not lossless Atmos audio. And when I booted up a lossless Atmos movie, it did not work. So just be aware of that. It's only going to work on the compressed stuff. And then lossless Dolby True HD and DTS did not work. And that's because the Fire TV here, like the Apple TV, does a PCM conversion of the audio on the hardware. So you're going to have a very similar experience with audio pass-through as you would on the Apple TV. It is not going direct. Let me show you some of the settings, though, to adjust on the Fire TV. So let's go over to the Fire TV settings here and begin on display and sounds. I'm going to go over to display. You, of course, want to make sure that your display has been properly recognized by the Fire TV hardware. You can make some adjustments in here to force it if need be. I have match original frame rate set to on. I believe this is off by default. So this is important for getting that 24p switchover to work. And if we go over to the dynamic range settings here, I have mine set to adaptive. This way it will properly switch in and out of HDR modes as needed, all the different modes that this one supports, which includes Dolby Vision, HDR10, HDR10 Plus, and HLG. And the rest of the settings here I left alone. On the audio side, you don't have a lot of options here because this does that PCM conversion in the background. So I did try messing around with this surround setting here, but it really doesn't do anything because it's either going to be PCM or the device is going to convert your audio to Dolby Digital Plus or Dolby Digital. So you don't just have a lot of flexibility here for getting direct audio pass-through. I'm going to jump now into the Plex app, which is going to look very familiar to the one we looked at on the Nvidia Shield. Let's have a look at that. So just like the Shield, I have adjust automatically set to off, home streaming set to maximum. If we go over to the advanced section, you can see I've got pass-through set for the HDMI port. Unfortunately, though, because there's something in between here, even though we're asking Plex to pass through the audio, the hardware is not going to do it. So that is why it works differently on the Shield than it does here on the Cube. And then, of course, I've got refresh rate switching set to on inside of Plex. You still need to enable that. And I have my resolution switching going on here too. So the video modes seem to work fine, but again, the audio is going to be problematic for your higher end audio content. Now, one other note on the Cube is that its Ethernet is only 100 megabits, and although most movies and TV shows are well below that amount of bandwidth, there are some examples of 4K content that exceeds 100 megabits per second. So in that case, believe it or not, you want to connect this to Wi-Fi, because it does have Wi-Fi 6 support that'll give you about 400 megabits of download performance. So let's take a look at the Xbox now, and at the moment, we are not quite there on Dolby Vision, and I think this is going to change very soon because they've made some progress since the last time I looked at this. So right now, the same movies that I played on the other devices to check the Dolby Vision compatibility didn't work here, but I did try a few others that were able to get the TV over into Dolby Vision mode, but the colors weren't correct. So I think they're close to getting this worked out, but at the moment I'm going to put an X here because it doesn't work as well as it does on the other boxes we talked about insofar as switching the television into the proper mode and getting the color right. But it does work with HDR10. It does switch the television into 24p. And all of the lossless audio modes work perfectly. So it's just passing that audio straight through as you would expect and not doing any other kind of processing on it, provided the settings are enabled to allow that feature to work. Now, just a note on hardware, I have the Xbox One S here on the desk. This, of course, is an older Xbox console, but it supports 4K video playback. And it supports that 4K resolution inside of Plex along with other video playback applications. So if you upgrade it and still have this kicking around, it's actually a pretty good media player to think about. The OG Xbox does not support 4K, but everything that you're about to see will work on the One S, the One X, and the Series S and X. Let's take a look at the display settings, though, so we can make sure everything is set up properly. One thing I always recommend people do, just like on the other boxes, is to see what your Xbox has detected insofar as its display capabilities. And right now, my capture hardware does not support Dolby Vision, but if it did, it would show up as being supported here, although, as we noted, Dolby Vision does not yet work on the Plex side. Now, if we go over to advanced into video modes, you just want to make sure that 24 Hertz is enabled here. You want to make sure that 4K and HDR10 are enabled. I would make sure Dolby Vision's enabled too, because if things ever get changed, it will start working, provided the Xbox is configured for that. And so right here, we've been able to set up the dynamic HDR modes shifting along with 24p shifting for videos that support that. Another thing you want to do is head over to your sound options, which is in the volume and audio output section here. And what you need to do is go over to additional options. And in here, you're going to see allow pass-through. And this is what enables that lossless audio to work through Plex. So when an app supports pass-through, that is needing to be enabled for that audio to get passed through. But when it's enabled, it just passes it through, just like the Shield does, and you're able to get all of those audio modes to work. So that's how these 4 popular players handle higher-end 4K Plex media with lossless audio and high dynamic range video. I would love to try out more players, so leave your suggestions down in the comment section, especially players that might be more obscure that are not as well known. I'm always eager to try out some new stuff to see how it stacks up with these higher end devices. That is going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching, and I want to thank Plex for their long-standing support of the channel. See you next time.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Chris Allegretta, Brian Parker, Hot Sauce and Video Games, Baby Metal Fox God, Tom Albrecht, Amda Brown, Matt Zagaya, and Tech Time with Eric. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/s.